Right, first thought, just dropped a new video. Let's get into it.
Tariffs have crashed global trade, fueled the Great Depression, helped Nazis rise to power, and left American families paying thousands more for everyday goods, worsening the problems they claim to solve.
I think one of the things that's really crazy for me overall is just the idea that shock doctrine stuff works. And there is not a single example where shock doctrine policies have made a country stronger. None. And the United States of America is doing it to itself. Like, these people are so lost in their own sauce that they're doing it to America. Like, we're shock doctrining ourselves. And this is honestly like one of those things where I'm kind of sitting back. Did you see the Mr. Beast quote where he stated life was easier without money? Then give me your money then. If life is easier without money, give me all your money. Give me all your money, Mr. Beast. Prove it. Elon's tech bros are self-admitted accelerationists. Accelerationists to what? Being defeated by China? What do you think is going to win? Okay, this is a basic foundational belief of this stream that is oftentimes implied but not outright said. So I'm going to say a foundational belief of this stream. And I'm going to try to be concise. I'm going to do my best. All right, are you guys ready? Human beings are more powerful when they are organized collectively. A corollary of that point is that the largest organizations of humanity, when objectively measured, are states. Therefore, you can derive that state power is the most powerful and important organization of human beings. And therefore, highly organized states are the most capable of affecting their will upon the world. And finally, if these states are the most effective way to affect their will upon the world, in order for us to achieve our ends, the wisest course is to seize state power. That is a foundational belief of this stream. Our mission as leftists is to seize state power to effectuate our will upon the world. And what is power? Power is the ability to force somebody who doesn't want to comply to comply. And there's a lot of different ways that you could force a person to do a thing they don't want to do. I like the softer ways, but I'm also okay with the harder ways. Hey, Mike, I'm a Canadian. Do you think I should make an effort to exclusively buy Canadian? I mean, if it feels good, you should do it. And so, okay, now that we said that foundational belief of my stream, why am I very not even that worked up about the United States being destroyed? Well, because if the United States is destroyed or becomes significantly impaired, what country is the most powerful country in the world? Communist China. So if the United States falls into this kind of shock doctrine, libertarian accelerationist trap, then communist China will be the most powerful nation on the planet. And so there's a certain level of, it's hard for me to get worked up, right? It's hard for me to get too worked up about it.
But even with all these drawbacks, the US loves this blunt economic weapon, and the incoming president plans to use it forcefully. His first round of tariffs forced
China is a totalitarian hellhole. Bro, just go on Red Note for 5 minutes. Just go on Red Note for 5 minutes.
Companies to shift entire supply chains, crushed others they were meant to save, and provoked retaliations that hurt farmers and workers alike. In this episode, we'll explain the real-world consequences of tariffs and what can be expected from Trump's promises. These new tariffs will be less a weapon against US enemies and more a game of Russian roulette. But before we do, I'd like to take a quick moment to thank our channel sponsor, Aura. And actually, it's a really important time to talk about them because...
Okay. Unethical reacts. Sorry, but we're being unethical today.
A huge wake-up call. You've never been more vulnerable online than you are right information to... They also have and your data, not data breaches. And if you don't, absolutely free. Okay, back to the video.
Unethical reacts.
So, what is a tariff? In a nutshell, tariffs are taxes on imports meant to protect local industries and create government revenue. Emphasis on meant to. The idea behind them is that by making foreign goods more expensive, consumers will buy domestic competitors. Though this often means paying more since companies can sneakily raise prices to just below the tariff tax. There are two main types: value-added, those that tack on a percentage of the product's value, and specific tariffs, which add a fixed fee per unit. For instance, a 10% value-added tariff on a $1,000 laptop adds $100, while a $2 specific tariff on shoes adds $2 to each pair of shoes. These taxes can apply to anything, from food and electronics to steel and aluminum, which increases the price of these items and anything that requires them. Today, approximately 2/3 of global trade involves products assembled from parts made from other countries. Tariffs force companies to renegotiate contracts, find new suppliers, or absorb higher costs, all of which create inefficiencies that complicate and disrupt trade. For example, the first Trump regime's tariffs on China went from less than 3% in 2017 to 24% by 2019. Large corporations...
China seeks stronger cooperation with Germany and the EU. China considers Germany and the European Union as a whole as strategic partners and wants stronger cooperation with them in the spirit of free trade and multilateralism. Foreign Minister Wang Yi told Chancellor Olaf Scholz China was willing to deepen all-around cooperation with Germany as part of bilateral efforts to maintain global peace and stability. Disgusting! Germany, whose huge car sector is reliant on China, voted last October against the European Union tariffs on Chinese-made electric vehicles. According to the statement from the Chinese Foreign Ministry, Wang conveyed to Scholz China's appreciation of Germany's rational and pragmatic attitude toward the tariffs. The officials discussed the Russian-Ukraine conflict, with Wang saying China and Europe share the goal of wanting to move towards a peaceful resolution of the crisis. China is willing to maintain communication with Germany and other relevant parties and continue to play a constructive role in promoting peace talks, Wang said. Following increased pressure from the United States on European members of NATO to increase their defense expenditure, Wang spoke of the necessity for balanced, effective, and sustainable European security framework, an official Chinese statement said. Wang on Friday gave a speech at the Munich conference laying out China's position on the Ukraine war and urging peace talks that included all stakeholders involved in the conflict. According to a separate statement from China, Wang also told his German counterpart on the sidelines of the conference that Germany has been a stabilizing force in its relation with the EU. Wang said China saw no fundamental conflicts between it and the EU in remarks to Kaja Kallas, the EU's foreign policy chief, and said China was willing to work to enhance mutual understanding and pursue global stability. During his time in Munich, Wang also met his French counterpart and urged a cooling of any trade friction. As comprehensive strategic partners, we believe that China and France and China and the EU have the wisdom and ability to handle the matter properly, he said. These warmongers, they're saying they want to trade. Oh, God, fuck these warmongers. No cheap solar panels. No cheap electric vehicles. How dare you try to invest in fusion research? We must destroy this country. They want to sail their boats. They want to sail boats in the South China Sea. How dare they? That's only 10,000 miles away from Europe. It's practically next door.
Like Cisco and Macy's moved production to places like Vietnam and Malaysia, which added additional costs and wasteful supply
Let
chain
me introduce you to a Chinese woman so you could become a Chinese citizen. I don't need your help to meet women, but thank you.
diversions as they scrambled to avoid these new tariffs. The US has historically used tariffs to isolate itself economically. After World War I, the US emerged as the least damaged, richest, and biggest economy in the world.
The Luigi court is packed. He's gonna have so many groupies, dude. He's got so many groupies. You kill one CEO and look how many groupies you get. Look how many supporters you get. Wow. Christ almighty. You kill one CEO and you instantly become a rock star. That's crazy. Allegedly kill one CEO. Luigi is practically a CCP agent. He hangs around a lot with Chinese people. That is the most profoundly racist thing I've ever heard in my life. That may be one of the most profoundly racist things I've ever heard that doesn't include a slur. This is my reaction. Whenever somebody's like, what do you think about Luigi killing that guy?
He was the best guy around.
What about the people he murdered?
What murder?
That's my reaction whenever somebody brings up Luigi. I didn't see anything. Did you guys see anything? I didn't see anything.
Yet they still passed the Emergency Tariff Act in 1921 and the Fordney-McCumber Tariff a year later, which imposed duties of up to 50%, which made it even harder for Europe to repay their debts to the US. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff in 1930 took things to record levels, which provoked retaliation from France, Italy, and Japan, while Britain and Germany turned to quotas and their own protectionism. By 1933, global trade was near total collapse, falling to just 35% of 1929 levels, worsening the Great Depression and fueling an inflation and unemployment crisis in Germany that helped the Nazis seize power. Unsurprisingly, fascism and protectionism don't fix anything.
Oh my God, chat, Condition Bleed hit the Order of Romeo, chat. If you don't know, chat, if you've been a subscriber on my stream for 5 years, you get a special customized chat badge called the Order of Romeo. It is so cool. All members of the Order of Romeo are like my best friends. 5 years. If you are an Order of Romeo haver, we should hang out. We should honestly do an Order of Romeo hangout. Just people that have subscribed for 5 years or more. That would be fun. Why is it called that? Because that was my dog, Romeo, who unfortunately passed. My dog, Romeo, who is a big member of the stream, unfortunately, he has passed. So, to commemorate him, we created the Order of Romeo. He was very cute.
In 1935, global trade had fallen even further, down to 28% of its pre-1929 levels. Since the 1940s, entrenched neoliberal dogma has asserted that free, open trade is the best way to boost productivity, to give consumers more choice, and to strengthen diplomatic ties. In 2016, lobbies favoring tighter protection had gained new momentum and influence over the Trump regime, which would break with nearly 80 years of US policy. They falsely claimed that US allies like Germany and major trade partners like China exploited this openness to grow their own surpluses and limited US exports, and that very strong tariffs were needed to fix the situation, which, understandably, spooked stakeholders both at home and abroad. Meanwhile, various industries warned that tariffs could raise household costs by up to $7,600 per year. But Trump soldiered on, pledging to revive domestic manufacturing through higher tariffs on imports, arguing it would stimulate US production. It's important to note here that the tariffs on China won rare bipartisan support, with Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer calling China, quote, the real trade enemy threatening American jobs, echoing Trump's rhetoric. Washington slapped tariffs on products made in China to the tune of $375 billion. Many of these applied to consumer and industrial tech, because of Trump's accusations that China was stealing intellectual property from big US tech companies on a large scale, and through vague, unfair practices. Trump then began to focus on steel, claiming his tariffs would curtail unfair foreign competition. In spite of these promises, prices rose, job growth lagged behind other sectors, and stock values plummeted. What's more, because
Zazman, thank you for the 5-tier. Holy shit, chat. We have a hype train. Well, in a little bit, chat, we will be bringing on Yogopnik. Friend of the stream, Yogopnik, will be joining us very shortly. So, this is really, but that'll only happen if we hit the sub goal, or I'm canceling the interview. I'm canceling the motherfucking interview if we do not get to 100 subs. I'm fucking canceling it. I'm saying, fuck you, Gopnik, you piece of shit. Fuck off. They didn't want you here. Don't make me say that. Don't make me say that. Is Yogopnik from Yugoslavia? Yes, he is. He is Tito's strongest soldier. Okay? As am I. Balkanized the Central Committee, that's right. I hate you for making me give you more subs than VO. That's called 4. We're 17 subs away, chat. Once we hit the goal, I'll send the invite. Once we hit the goal, I'll send the invite. Okay. It looks like we're making it. It looks like we may make it. All right. What the fuck is this? Why did this pop up? Scared the shit out of me. Whew. When things just pop up right on your screen, you're like, what the fuck? All right, let's finish this video. Okay, chat. Looks like the top sub gifter now, in all seriousness, chat. I really want you to consider how important this stream is. Think about that. Think about that. Okay, I'm
these
just saying
tariffs
shit.
are
Let's keep
effectively
going.
taxes on U.S. companies that import steel.
Red
They
Dawn,
ended
thank
up
you as
costing
well.
such firms nearly $3 billion per year. While
Louverture, thank you for the 5. Red Dawn, thank you for the 5. Anadol, thank you for the 5. Marble Honey, thank you for 19 subs. Cod Hera, thank you for 5. Vlad Kusuku, thank you for 5. Don Sid Bo, thank you for the 5. RK Monkey, thank you for the 5. The 6. Critacular, thank you for the 5. And Zazman, thank you for the 5. And Ham and Fist, thank you for the 20. That's what we're talking about. And Mr. Terrible Man, thank you for the 5. And everybody who subbed and resubbed, thank you so much. You guys, gals, non-binary pals are the best. Don't forget that the top sub donor and the top bit donor gets the conductor badge. So for as little as 201 bits, you can get the conductor badge right now. Cheers to 36 years spent the evening with the missus who made some amazing buffalo chicken street tacos, topped with Stilton blue cheese crumbles. Finished off the evening with manga boba tea and painted some D&D miniatures. It sounds like you're living the life, Jifram, honestly. It sounds like you're living every nerd's dream. You're living every white nerd's dream. And honestly, I'm jelly. That sounds great. I like blue cheese. But I'm also half Scottish. All right, on my mother's side. My grandfather, who was Scottish, with a Scottish accent, from Scotland, would eat Limburger cheese and raw onions. Now, if you've never had Limburger cheese, I encourage you to have some. There must have been some horrifying farts. We have an iron gut. You know, in like in Fallout, you can get the perk Iron Gut. We're born with it. Lead belly, exactly.
While steel firms saw partial rebounds after 2020, the persistent inefficiencies.
Water ice or Italian ice? It's Italian ice. It's Italian ice. I'm a very basic Italian ice boy. I like Rita's Italian ice. And I get the gelati. And my gelati at Rita's Italian ice is very basic bitch shit. I get vanilla custard with cherry ice. That hits the spot every fucking time. If you don't know what that means, why aren't you from the Northeast? You fucking suck. Rita's is open? It's February. Wait, is Rita's open? Did you try the Twitch flavor Rita's had at TwitchCon? I did indeed. When I saw Rita's Italian Ice at TwitchCon, I like ran to it. I was like, oh my God, you guys are here. I was so happy. I was surrounded by these fucking West Coasters. Thank you so much for rescuing me. I've never had Italian ice.
Ever wondered what you should order when you visit Rita's? Well, have no fear. Professor Pickiest Eater is here to give you a little bit of Rita's Italian Ice 101. Whenever you visit Rita's, the first thing you need to decide is if you'll be getting the creamy custard, the refreshing ice, or both. So let's start with the creamy custard. At Rita's, you can choose from different flavors of custard including vanilla, chocolate, or a mix of both. And some days they even have special flavors like pistachio and salted caramel. From the Italian ice, the eclectic selection of flavors changes every week, giving you the opportunity for a new but still refreshing experience whenever you visit. Okay, so now, you're still undecided on which ice to get? Then order the Ice Flight, where you can sample 4 flavors of Italian ice with a dollop of custard in the center. It'll help you figure out which combination you like in case you want to order a gelati next. What's a gelati, you ask? The gelati is one of the best sellers of Rita's. It's a generous layer of your choice of Italian ice that's topped with creamy custard. And you can even...
Okay, it's not just topped. There's also custard at the bottom. This shit is legendary. I don't do though this. Where the fuck is this guy? in the Philippines. I was like, damn, Rita's is open in the Philippines now? It's in the Philippines now? I honestly should open my own Rita's. Like, if I had a business, if I had a business where I was exploiting people, Rita's Italian Ice would be it. That would be such a fucking good company, good business. It's so much better than like fucking yogurt. I hate yogurt shops. There, I said it. When I went to Bangkok, there was one there. Oh, okay, so it's going global now. That's crazy. That's crazy. Rita's is going global. Wow. Rita's franchise company, LLC, doing business as Rita's Italian Ice, originally and now informally known as Rita's Water Ice, is a privately owned and operated American quick service restaurant chain originated in the Philadelphia metropolitan area that expanded throughout and now operates primarily in the mid-Atlantic United States. I can't believe that this is blowing up. This is a Philadelphia. Oh my. Rita's was created one day after I was born? That's crazy. That's crazy. All right, let's get back to this video on politics.
Caused by the tariffs prevented a full recovery. These tariffs, justified by vague national security concerns, even led to friction with close allies like Canada, Germany, Japan, and South Korea. Of course, China didn't take this lying down, and responded with tariffs of their own targeting nearly 6,000 US products worth $109.3 billion, while hinting at more disruptive retaliation by curbing US farm imports, placing key American crops, like soybeans, at risk since US-China soybean trade accounts.
I'm the most tourist that ever touristed. Let's get our AI explanation of tourism, not tourists, being a tourist. Loyal, generous, and sensual. Loyal, generous, sensual, hard worker, stubborn, and materialistic. So true. Indulgent, hostile, domineering, gluttonous, jealous, lazy, money-oriented, and stubborn. I'm not money-oriented. That's the only thing. But it is true. I do like a different type of generosity. What's my Chinese zodiac? It sucks. I'm not going to say.
For about 25% of the global market. Also, 9 rounds of countermeasures targeted over $31.8 billion in US food exports, focusing heavily on American farm products. It slashed exports by 11
You flex how much you make and use a $50 camera. I don't flex how much I make. The only time I ever flex how much I make is toward people who care about that kind of shit. Like if somebody comes in and is like, "You're just a broke boy and I'm the best," you know, I'm like, I make more than you, man. Why are you trying to come in here and act like you're rich? Like that's the only time I ever in a million years flex how much I make. Is what people for who that's important and their identity come in here and try to shit on me. That, or like in general. Well, there was a Rita's in Atlanta, but Google says it's temporarily closed because it's winter. The thing about Rita's is they tend to like close in winter because, you know, people aren't buying water ice when it's blizzarding outside because it's a Philadelphia chain. It's not a Southern California chain where you have, you know, ice cream sundaes every February. $6 billion and redirected the sales outside the US.
Overall, the US lost over $15 billion in farm trade, while competitors in South America and Europe gained ground in critical items like soybeans and pork. Meanwhile, during all this, China took a commanding lead in 5G technology worldwide thanks to Huawei hardware and the government's massive investment in their space program. Finally, after over 16 months of negotiations, the US and China agreed to a limited trade deal.
Did you guys hear that Elon wants to destroy the International Space Station faster? So China will soon be the only country and only place with a space station in orbit. And their space station is awesome. And the International Space, like, what's crazy to me is this: the International Space Station cost, like, how much did it cost to get up there? Like $1 trillion or something insane. It's just wild that they just don't boost it up. Like, why don't they just boost it up to a much higher orbit and park it? And then later, you have all this material, highly refined metals and things, you know, old solar panels that you could go and, like, you could later, you know, maybe reprocess or recycle, or it's crazy. Just sit it up there in the sky. And people are like, it's not worth it. It costs $10,000 a kilogram to put stuff in orbit. You're looking at it like a bureaucrat, which is, we have to who says you have to go up there and maintain it? Just have it go up there. Don't even maintain it. It doesn't have to be in use to still have value. You have to maintain it or it becomes a problem. Hypothetical problem. People say it's too expensive to put into a stable orbit. This is people thinking very linearly, and this is a big issue. I don't know how they're going to deconstruct it. It's going to land in the Pacific. That's how they're going to deconstruct it. They're just going to crash it into the Pacific and hope it doesn't hit anybody. It can still sustain damage from other orbiting particles. Okay. It's like, imagine you could put hundreds of tons of highly refined metals in close Earth orbit for us to go up and grab and refine or use for other things, and you're just like, nah, let's take the $1 trillion and throw it in the trash can. This is the Chinese space station. NASA needs to do. We don't have the capability to raise the ISS to a higher orbit. It would break apart. What do you mean? We do it every time we keep it in orbit now. We're always raising it to a higher orbit. What are you talking about? The only way it can be where it is has to constantly be raised. What are you talking about? It has to be boosted to stay in low Earth orbit all the time. What do you mean? Have any of the experiments in space helped humanity? he said on the internet using his LCD monitor, talking on a computer. All right, let me put it to you another way. Let's imagine that we could capture an asteroid that was full of platinum, iron, nickel, and we could just park it in like near Earth orbit and go and mine it from time to time. Would that be worth doing? I think it's perpetually in that orbit due to gravity. It can't fall. Incorrect. There is still air particles that are slowing down the space station. It has to continually boost itself up. Okay, let's see what NASA says. Why did NASA decide to deorbit the space station instead of alternative options? Disassembly and return to Earth? Stupid. Boosting to a higher orbit, natural orbital decay with some random reentry, and controlled targeted reentry to a remote ocean area. NASA evaluated moving the station from its present orbit to a higher orbital regime where its lifetime could be theoretically extended, thereby preserving the spacecraft for future generations. The space station flies at an altitude where the Earth's atmosphere still creates drag and requires regular reboost to stay in orbit. The station operates in LEO, about 257 miles in altitude. It has a mass of more than 945 million pounds. Depending on solar activity, the station's orbital lifetime, the time before the station would naturally re-enter from atmospheric drag alone at this altitude, is 1 to 2 years without reboost. For this reason, the station cannot remain in orbit indefinitely, as it will naturally fall back to Earth, where an uncontrolled deorbit could pose a threat to people on the ground. Space station operations require a full-time crew, and as such, an inability to keep crews on board would rule out operating at high... I'm not saying keep it at a higher altitude with a crew. I'm just saying move it up there, and if we decide, hey, we would have grabbed some of the 1 million pounds of refined metals that are sitting there and reprocess them. You know, like, how much is 1 million pounds? How much would it take to boost 1 million pounds of stuff to orbit? Going from orbit to a slightly higher altitude is a lot less energy than taking it from the surface of the Earth and accelerating it past all this atmosphere and accelerating it all. That's what I'm talking about. Okay. Boosting the International Space Station require 120 to 140 meters a second of delta V for a 100-year target orbit lifetime, and 760 meters a second delta V for a greater than 10,000-year orbit lifetime. In comparison to 57 meters a second for controlled deorbit. So it's only twice as much? Ascending to these orbits would require the development of a new propulsive and tanker vehicle that does not currently exist. While still currently in development, vehicles such as SpaceX Starship are being designed to deliver significant amounts of cargo through these orbits. However, there are prohibitive engineering challenges when docking with such a large vehicle to the space station and being able to use its thrusters while remaining within the space station's structural margins. Other vehicles would require both new certifications to fly at higher altitudes and multiple flights to deliver propellant. The risk of a penetrating or catastrophic impact to the space station increases drastically above 257 miles, while higher altitudes provide a longer theoretical orbit life. The mean time between an impact event decreases from 51 years at the current operational altitude to less than 4 years at 497 mile to 700-year orbit. This means that the likelihood of an impact leaving the station unable to maneuver or react to future threats. Okay, so here's where they're assuming you want to keep the vehicle like pressurized and capable of operating as the vehicle that it is. I'm not saying that. Like, I'm saying it's 1 million pounds of refined metal that cost $1 trillion to get there. Wouldn't it be better to just stick it into an orbit where you can later, if you want, go grab that metal because it's cheap and already in orbit? I don't think they're not really responding to my argument. This is just like, oh no, you want to make it go higher so it could be a space station higher, and it's like, no, I mean, maybe that would be a smart idea to try to stick it at Lagrange point or something. That might be interesting, but like, no, that's not what I was saying. Anyway, okay. Basically, my conclusion is what I'm saying is technically feasible, but it would cost money, and therefore it is easy and cheap to just crash the thing. So we're going to do that.
Amounting to a truce in their trade war. The US agreed to put off a tariff increase on $250 billion of Chinese imports, and China agreed to buy $40 to $50 billion of US agricultural products, as well as, quote, to be more transparent in foreign market interventions, ease US entry into the financial services sector, and enhance enforcement of intellectual property rights. All told, these 7 rounds of tariff increases affected over $325 billion of exports.
So basically, it cost $150 billion to make, and we're just going to blow it up. Imagine somebody says, all right, we're blowing up this $150 billion thing because trying to come up with a different way of using it is hard. This is like 3 years of college tuition for every American that's in college. They're just blowing it up. Oh, well, it's only $150 billion. Let's crash it into the ocean. Please look up Kessler syndrome. SpaceX's dumb satellites are far more likely to cause Kessler syndrome than just having a space station be in a higher orbit. I mean, if nobody wants to buy it and nobody wants to do anything with it and nobody cares, then I guess blowing it up is the answer.
From China across 6,428 affected products, representing over 14% of exports. This incoherent struggle to balance strategic, economic, and political aims failed to meet any of Trump's stated goals. The deficit grew, prices went up on thousands of products, jobs were lost, and the US gained no new leverage in negotiations. China has seen and dealt with previous turbulence. For example, dependence on manufacturing exports in 2007 and 2008 dropped from 30% of GDP to 18%, which, somewhat counterintuitively, is due in part to its larger share of global production. Its import demand for manufacturing inputs slid from 23% to under 10% of GDP, keeping the trade surplus stable despite tariffs. Their Made in China 2025 program expanded local production of advanced goods, resulting in most value now being domestic. The Belt and Road Initiative emerged as part of this internal rebalancing.
Did you see the bus bombings and they were done by Israelis? Amazing.
But it also offers
let's finish this
investment
video.
opportunities that promote international cooperation with an eye toward multilateral openness.
Little bear, little bear, little bear, little bear raid, little bear raid. Hey, little bear. I was just being sad that they're destroying the International Space Station. And people were like, no, they have to do it because it could cause Kessler syndrome. And they were just saying things they've heard. The bottom line is they're doing it because it's cheaper, chat. I don't care.
By linking overland and maritime
really
routes
sad,
spanning
man.
Asia,
Human race
Europe,
sucks.
and beyond, the BRI takes advantage of this connectivity-driven trade growth. So far, only a
today's
quarter of its
episode,
planned
the
$1
ISS
trillion budget has been spent, with another trillion secured through entities like the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. The project includes 38 maritime agreements covering 47 countries, infrastructure investments in 34 countries, and port projects in places such as Genoa and Trieste in Italy. Strategic choke points like the Strait of Malacca and the Suez Canal have been addressed by adding new routes that avoid them entirely, which helps immensely in de-dollarization. In fact, even if these choke points weren't an issue politically, it's likely China would do it anyway in order to further diversify trade routes. So, what will another Trump term bring? Economically speaking, he's promised to impose a 10% tariff across the board for most, if not all, trading partners, as well as a whopping 60% tariff on all Chinese imports. From here, we can only speculate, but we'll do so based on past and current data. Let's start with income. Estimates show that low-income earners could see their take-home pay drop by as much as 3.5%, and middle-income earners would end up paying an extra $1,700 per year in taxes. For a country where 66% of the population can't afford a $1,000 emergency, this would be catastrophic. This is consistent with previous tariffs where the average household income shrank by $1,300. However, since there's much more trade today, that 10% tariff would act more like a consumption tax of up to $1,500 per year, which of course will contribute significantly to inflation. But let's zoom out and
my argument for the ISS is not to save it as an ISS. My argument is keep a million tons of metal in orbit that you could then use that metal for scrap later. Like if you could get some sort of like space refining or space manufacturing system in orbit, that would be that's what I'm arguing in favor. Just having a million pounds of refined metals would be much easier to manufacture things in orbit with using it as scrap. But if that's just not plausible, then I guess it's not plausible. I guess we're gonna have to spend another 200 billion to boost more shit. It is what it is.
take a look at the bigger picture. A common, though imprecise, way to understand a nation's economy is by seeing how things like the GDP and purchasing
There's
power
already way too much scrap metal in space. Oh, there's not. Oh, there's not. There's like trash that's flying in all sorts of eccentric orbits. Yeah. That's not the same thing as a huge thing, a huge structure that you could like grab a hold of and then melt down. But it is. It's okay. It's fine. Never mind. I'm too much of a visionary. I'm too much of a visionary. I know I'm not the only person to say this. I'm sure. I bet you there are people that are arguing what I'm saying out there who are astrophysicists or you know, NASA advisors. I cannot be the only person to say this. Just commonsensical economizing. It costs $10,000 a kilogram to go to space. There's no way people are like, okay, what is 100 million pounds divided by, you know, how much money is that? Just scrap value. You're jumping the gun. We don't need to have trains yet. The left can't afford to be space nerds yet. We need to focus. I've never heard anything more wrong in my entire life. I've never heard anything more wrong in my entire life. It's less than 1,500. Okay, so let's do the math. Let's do the math. Okay, you said it's 1,500 a kilogram? Is that how much it is to go to space? The ISS is 1 million pounds in mass. The space shuttle cost 1.2 billion to launch at 65,000 pounds. The Falcon 9 cost 60 million for slightly less than 50,000 pounds. Okay, we'll go by the Falcon 9. So I'll just grab a calculator real quick. So 1 million divided by 50,000 is 20 times 60 million, you said? So just launch costs would be what? So it would be like the values of mass to weight ratio will drastically change if Starship comes online. Somewhere around like $1.2 million of just to boost that back. Here you go, Mike. These guys are pleading the same case as you. Industry sees missed opportunity at the orbiting ISS. NASA's plan to spend $1 billion on a tug to deorbit the International Space Station is a missed opportunity to instead repurpose or recycle the station, some in industry argue. Spending $1 billion to bring down the station sends the wrong message. It is a missed opportunity to instead repurpose elements of the station, recycling material that could be used for other commercial applications. As technology matures, certainly in the next decade, we're going to get to the point where we're going to be able to reuse and recycle a lot of those materials. Instead of letting it burn up and lose all that economic value, you take it to a foundry in space and break it down into raw materials. Oh, okay, so I'm not the only person to say this. The right thing to do is bring it down, said another panelist, Robert Haig, president of satellite servicing company Space Logistics. However, he saw benefits of finding ways to repurpose at least parts of the ISS. It would send a demand signal to industry that the entire world sees that this is important. There's a lot of sunk cost there. It would be a shame not to use it what we can, said Professor John Klein at George Washington Space Policy Institute. So basically, they just don't want to do it. It comes down to that.
Parity, which reflects the relative value of a currency by accounting for differences in local cost and price levels across countries, compare. A 10% blanket tariff
Tell
alone.
me you've never rebuilt a car before. Jesus Christ, Michael. Don't you know the first thing you do after going to a pick and pull for a parts car is to dump it in the ocean? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying use the ISS as a pick and pull for parts car. That's exactly what I'm saying. And then maybe one day we'll have refining capability in orbit. And you would be able to recycle shit. But maybe I'm too sci-fi brained. I don't know. It just seems to me that the most expensive part of going to space is the part where you go to space. And then if you have something in space already, it's probably better than trying to boost something new from the ground.
Can drain about 1% of GDP, and in combination with other measures, consumers might shoulder an extra 1.8% in expenses. That's roughly $500 billion annually. And while that sounds and is very concerning, its effect on purchasing power parity is much more important to you, the consumer. By some estimates, Trump's 10% blanket tariff will cost the American consumption base over $1 trillion just for your everyday items. And this is before inflation. That is very
bad. The problem with
bad.
trying to dump it on the moon, Molotozone, is that takes a lot of energy to go from low Earth orbit to the moon. I don't know that that's feasible. That would be way more expensive. That's like crazy more expensive.
News. But why are the prices so high when they're supposed to protect local industry and make things cheaper?
All right, we're watching the tariffs
by
video.
limiting foreign imports, that also means that anything imported to make the stuff made in the USA will be affected by those tariffs, raising the product cost and therefore creating higher prices for you, the consumer. Tariffs from 2018 and 2019 raised costs for suppliers by more than 4%, contributing to a 1.4% drop in manufacturing jobs. And that's just the short-term effects. Research since shows that manufacturing employment did not rise long term, so the expectations for another, higher tariff are even worse. But the in-store cost increases are just a downstream factor. The cascade starts with suppliers and producers. In response to Trump's first tariffs, producers shifted operations abroad, a change which requires significant investment and effort. So others simply tried to avoid it by pretending to be from a country that isn't affected by the tariff. Schemes of this kind affect everything from mattresses to solar panels, and law enforcement was only able to stop about $500 million worth of evasions last.
By the way, they are building a high... Oh, did you guys see this? Vietnam is building high-speed rail. Vietnam is building high-speed rail. This was yesterday.
Rail tracks in Vietnam, built during its French colonial period, are struggling to keep up with demand. Now, the country is seeking a revamp, with Beijing as its backer. An $8 billion railway will be built later this year, connecting Vietnam's port city of Haiphong to the city of Lao Chai on the border with China. Vietnam says it'll promote economic growth and tourism, carrying both passengers and freight cars at a higher speed.
Trade between China and Vietnam is already absolutely massive. And this railway, it's designed to make this trade faster, cheaper, and more predictable as well. So currently, China supplies much of the raw materials that fuels Vietnam's manufacturing sector. And keeping that pipeline steady is absolutely critical.
China will fund the project through loans as part of its Belt and Road Initiative, a $1 trillion mega project aimed at building a global infrastructure network. In neighboring Laos, China built a major high-speed rail in just a few years, but high-interest loans have left the country with a mountain of debt. For now in Vietnam, there's hope the project will give domestic transport much-needed improvement.
I am someone who is passionate about travelling. I have many goals to travel across Vietnam by motorbike and train. When this new railway line is completed, I'll give it a try.
If there is a new route, it will be even more convenient. I travel by train regularly and rarely travel by car. Although my house is located on the route between Haiphong and Hanoi, I never travel by car. The train route is a direct line and it doesn't cause any congestion or disruptions.
Vietnam has long tried to balance relations between both the US and China, though it's sided with Washington against Beijing's increasing assertiveness in the contested waters of the South China Sea. But as foreign businesses turn their attention to Vietnam, it's China which has mapped a route for greater investment in the country's infrastructure. Behdad Mehichi, Al Jazeera.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel.
Interesting. Interesting. So that was relevant because China, it's going to be very hard to sanction China and stop them that way.
Year. These schemes are openly described as a shell game by those in the industry, with all involved parties rolling the dice knowing there's a good chance their products will slip through the cracks. We can see the issue tariffs create by taking a look at one recent example, a US retailer that sold cabinets made in China. Tariffs caused the price of their products to skyrocket, so this company told their supplier to move operations to Malaysia before they'd continue as a customer. The supplier agreed. However, later inspections revealed containers labeled "Made in Malaysia" contained products that had actually been made in China, something which the supplier admitted afterwards. The cost of simply correcting the customs documents cost the retailer $650,000. This, of course, led to a lawsuit and other legal battles. When this effect is applied to the entire industry, we can see how cabinet imports from China plunged from 1.3 billion to just 26 million, while Vietnam's share surged. A tariff of 60%, like the one Trump is planning, will make this look tame by comparison, barely noteworthy. But since you probably don't buy cabinets all the time, let's look at some more relatable products. Smartphone shipments from places like India and South Korea climbed 42%, with laptops and chips also rerouted. Toys, gaming consoles, and lithium-ion batteries still predominantly come from China, and account for over 70% of US imports of all products in that category. Producers of things like semiconductors for all our tech gadgets and laptops moved their operations out of China. This has caused imports of these products from China to drop by 35% since 2017. But even with that drop, China still accounts for 14% of total US imports. Not to mention, many Vietnamese and Mexican goods rely on Chinese components. Needless to say, prices are about to make American jaws drop and make life that much more expensive. The US has wielded unprecedented hegemonic power for about 80 years now. This is because the US frequently abuses its power. And now, many countries are seeking alternative trade partners. Enter BRICS, a growing organization of countries, beginning with Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, that is building multipolar institutions that push for economic sovereignty outside of American control. At the
problem with BRICS is that they're not loyal to each other. It's a good idea on paper, but everyone's trying to cheat. They don't work as a block. And the reason why they don't work as a block, like the United States and Europe work as a block. Why do the United States and Europe work so well as a block? The answer is because Europe is a puppet. Europe is a puppet state. And so they don't actually have their own independent foreign policy, right? They just do what they're told. And with these countries, they don't have that kind of leverage over each other. So they're all trying to cheat. They're all trying to get advantage. And this is the one problem of this like a multipolar world. Because if BRICS was cohered, if they did operate in a collective way, they would be more powerful than the West. And they're not, but they can't. And the reason why is, as I said, because, you know, the Russians are not reliable. Modi is not reliable. They're all trying to, you know, they all have these nationalist egos. It's not happening.
24 Kazan summit in Russia, BRICS gained 13 new members, including Belarus, Turkey, Algeria, Nigeria, and Uganda. In January of this year, 4 other countries joined: Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and the UAE. Quite the diverse group. Partner status puts countries on the path to full membership, which looks increasingly valuable as the US empire continues to decline. Xi Jinping called the organization a vanguard for governance and international finance reform, and others have praised this impressive roster's potential to present a serious challenge to the dollar's dominance. BRICS, with its new members, now represents over 1/3 of the world's GDP, over 40% of the global population,
sometimes people are like, oh, Mike, Russia is not, or excuse me, China isn't forcing communism on these other countries, therefore it's not helping spread communism. And I think that is an incorrect analysis of the situation. I have a much longer view than it must happen tomorrow. My plan, I believe that left-wing politics will win the more and more the international system of dominance imposed by the US is dismantled. I think we'll see more Claudia Sheinbaums or Lula da Silvas all over the world. And that, you know, and then people even more further to the left. And these capitalist systems are not going to be able to be imposed on the rest. That's the system. That's the world I'm looking for. Is we dismantle U.S. dominance. We allow countries to operate within their own sovereignty. The majority of people will be left-leaning. The contradictions of capitalism will cause their own crises. And that's just the reality. And the one criticism I have of China is I do feel like they're too transactional. They're too transactional. I think they're a bit too pragmatic. Whereas the USSR was very dogmatic, China is a bit too pragmatic. They need to be a little bit, and I think Xi is kind of leaning a little bit more in the direction of becoming a little bit more ideologically aware. But I think China is basically focused on self-preservation at this point. They understand that they are not the hegemon. They understand that they need to make any friends they can to prevent them from being isolated and sanctioned and undermined like the Russians were. And I think that's kind of like they're fighting with the understanding of the failure of the Soviet Union.
Produces roughly 30% of the world's oil. This amassing of alliances and resources provides a stable and sound base.
If all the countries are neo-Nazis and pro-China, Xi would still trade with them all. If all the countries are neo-Nazis and pro-United States, Trump would still trade with them all. This is just, you know, it's like the United States is installing the neo-Nazi governments. You know what I mean? Like what are you talking about?
from which to create new international systems and standards. China's cross-border interbank payment system, for instance, boasts nearly 1,500 participating banks in 113 countries, handling $16.52 quadrillion in 2023. A respectable amount even when compared to SWIFT's $150 quadrillion. Russia has also built a domestic financial transaction system to replace SWIFT, which they've used for processing nearly all domestic financial transactions. Their Mir payment card accounts for the rest, and makes up half of Russian card transactions and functions overseas in places like Venezuela, Belarus, and parts of Africa. Russia is integrating their systems with Iran's for direct currency exchanges, which could be the start of a truly international system, rather than the weaponized and US-controlled SWIFT system. And while total substitution remains out of reach in the short term, alternative payment systems and domestic technologies have shown they're very good at finding ways around Western finance. The US empire is rapidly declining. That much is obvious. But what isn't as clear is how the US will handle it. This isn't the first time an empire has fallen since the Industrial Revolution.
I don't think it's, I mean, I think my main disagreement, I think people are getting a little bit ahead of themselves, which is the US is absolutely in a bad way, but it's just a flesh wound. It's just a flesh wound. They're not having a good time, but the U.S. is the foundations of the U.S. are extremely, extremely strong. And we'll see how much damage Trump does.
That honor goes to Britain. The US decline has much in common with Britain's, so we'll briefly take a look at their similarities to make an educated guess at what's on the horizon. As China has become a serious player on the world stage, the US has found itself staring down similar economic challenges as those Britain faced when Germany rapidly became a potent economic force at the end of the 19th century. With all the talk of how good and rational competition is, in practice, hegemonic powers hate it. Fast forward to after September 11th, 2001. American unipolarity seems untouchable, even though militant non-state organizations such as the Taliban were making a mockery of the US military, which, again, mirrors the kind of threats Britain encountered in their vast array of colonies. And who could forget the Bush regime's claim of being the lone country allowed to engage in preemptive interventions and preemptive strikes anywhere in the world? That isn't new either, because, as you've already guessed, Britain used to do the same thing. Not only that, but the overall unilateral posture taken by both countries during their decline goes against everything they claimed to believe in pursuit of power they'll never again attain. The US is desperately trying to hold on to its violent and coercive empire in any way it can, which makes the United States the most dangerous country on Earth. But it's not all doom and gloom. As we've seen, a fairer, more collaborative international monetary framework is being developed to reduce the dollar's dominance and ensure there's a stable system in place for when Western control falters. This is especially important as China is planning to settle oil in their own currency, the yuan. China is the world's largest importer of oil. Not using US dollars to process transactions will cause a significant disruption to the petrodollar status quo. The petrodollar system means most oil transactions are priced and settled in US dollars. Therefore, in order to buy oil, countries and their central banks must hold large reserves of US dollars, creating consistent demand for the US dollar in foreign exchange markets. So China setting their oil sales in yuan will require countries and central banks to exchange a significant portion of their dollars for yuan. This means an increase in demand for the yuan and decrease in demand for the dollar, with the consequence being the dollar's value dropping while the yuan's value rises. When a currency loses value, it becomes a driving force in inflation. Add to this what BRICS is doing to de-dollarize and provide a framework that allows for transactions between nations to be conducted in their own currencies, and it becomes crystal clear that the US is going to be left behind due to its unwillingness to give up hegemony in favor of cooperation and equality. Tariffs have their place here and there depending on economic policy, but the political right has opportunistically presented them as an easy fix to complex economic problems. History shows that they don't deliver, and often harm the people they're meant to protect by driving up prices, disrupting supply chains, stifling trade, and ensuring retaliation.
All right, give me 40 seconds.